Hello, this is Claudia, and for the next hour I'll be reading from the June 3rd issue of the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Canada gives new trade plan to address U.S. issues. LeBlanc proposes 16-year extension of the CUSMA Pact. The Carney government presented new proposals to the U.S. on Tuesday that it said should address trade complaints of the Trump administration and are aimed at restarting formal trade talks on the Continental Trade Pact. We presented a number of specific proposals to U.S. Trade Rep. Jamieson Greer that we think are good in the broader context of the North American economy and respond to some long-standing issues that the United States has raised with us, said Canada-U.S. Trade Minister Dominic LeBlanc. But LeBlanc refused to detail the proposals or say which complaints they address. The U.S. has a laundry list of irritants, including Canada's regulation of big U.S.-based tech firms, quotas imposed for American products in protected agricultural sectors like dairy, the leasing of crown forested lands to lumber companies, and even provincial government bans on U.S. alcohol sales. LeBlanc said the proposals are measures that should give the Americans a lot of comfort, and the minister denied bilateral trade talks are stalled, saying they have been effectively underway again since he and Greer began talking in March, following a 5-month suspension ordered by President Donald Trump in protest of Ontario's anti-tariff ad blitz. The U.S. insists formal trade negotiations are only underway with Mexico as its officials continue to complain Canada has yet to address trade irritants. Speaking at the Canadian Embassy in Washington following a meeting with Greer, LeBlanc told reporters he and Janice Charette, Canada's chief trade negotiator, also raised American sectoral tariffs on autos, steel, aluminum, and lumber products, which apply globally but are extremely difficult for sectors that are essential to the Canadian economy, LeBlanc said. Prime Minister Mark Carney has said those tariffs are in violation of the Canada-United States-Mexico agreement known as CUSMA in Canada, but LeBlanc would neither say what he proposed nor how Greer responded, citing a promise to keep their discussions confidential, which he said is essential to building trust. LeBlanc said they agreed to continue exchanges this week as Greer heads to Europe and to be in touch next week. The meeting, which LeBlanc described as long and positive, came after Canada formally notified the United States and Mexico it wishes to renew the trade pact for another 16 years, but is open to improvements. Reuters reported Tuesday that Mexico has also said it would like to renew the deal for 16 years. In a letter Monday to his counterparts, LeBlanc stressed the mutual benefits to all three economies of the free trade region that spans North America. At the Washington News Conference, LeBlanc revealed Mexico and the U.S. have also communicated formally their intentions to Canada, but declined to reveal what the correspondent said. Canada's letter, released Tuesday morning as LeBlanc and Charette were in Washington, amounts to legal notice under the 2018 agreement that requires all parties to signal their intent before July 1st, whether they wish to renew or engage in annual reviews of the trading arrangement. Any party could withdraw altogether with 6 months' notice. The letter was released before LeBlanc and Charette met at 3 p.m., with Greer against another backdrop of taunts by Trump. Late Monday night, amid a stream of posts endorsing various U.S. politicians, Trump posted 51st State on his social media platform, Truth Social, as he linked to a Bloomberg story reporting Canada has dipped into a technical recession for the first time since 2020 after 2 consecutive quarters of contraction in economic activity. In Montreal in the afternoon, the Prime Minister declined to directly respond to the jab, saying the President is an exceptionally active user of social media, particularly in recent months, and we're not going to respond or react to everything that he posts. But at Queen's Park, Premier Doug Ford fired back at Trump's latest 51st State statement. Enough of the nonsense, rubbish, I should say, from President Trump. I get tired of that guy, said Ford. Nevertheless, the Canadian government insists it is having constructive contacts with the Americans, despite the lack of formal bilateral negotiations that Mexico is having with the U.S. LeBlanc in his letter reminded his counterparts that a renegotiation CUSMA is a key to prosperity, calling it highly beneficial to our countries and to the integrated North American economy. North America is one of the largest and most successful economic regions in the world. Together we can compete globally, wrote LeBlanc in an echo of Carney's pitch last week in New York. And while the Carney government is willing to consider any proposal that can be beneficial to all three nations' long-term prosperity, LeBlanc stressed that addressing the punitive American sectoral tariffs will be essential. LeBlanc did not specify which of those tariffs are deal breakers. The Trump administration has levied hefty duties on steel, aluminum, autos, lumber, copper, and cabinetry manufacturing. On Monday night, the U.S. slightly adjusted certain tariffs hitting farm and construction equipment as economic pressures mount on food producers. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre told reporters that Trump's ongoing 51st state statements are ridiculous, and Canadians must not let themselves be distracted by that talk. He said he is concerned that LeBlanc is traveling to Washington at a time when Mark Carney has led us into only recession in the G7, which Poilievre said that puts Canada in a position of weakness. But Carney suggested Tuesday that Canada's economic position is a complicated picture, with some of the weakness due to his government's decisions to rein in immigration, which has dampened population growth, and government spending. Carney acknowledged choppiness in terms of how investment is happening. But we're also seeing at the same time the foundations coming into place, settling in for that stronger, more resilient economy. On the dock in dismay, sauna owner denied waterfront berth, blames convoluted governance. An entrepreneur who wanted to keep operating a finished sauna on Toronto's waterfront this summer says he's been put out of business for now by an unfair ruling from the Toronto Port Authority. It leaves us releasing the 10 staff we had. It leaves us parking the sauna without a place to operate it until the fall, said Matt Slamman, who together with the business partners opened the loyally floating sauna at the Rees Street Slip on Queens Quay West in December. Part of the long-term vision was getting a summer location. Slamman, who has taken sole ownership of the business and rebranded it Saunawa, said operating on the waterfront means navigating a myriad organizations in charge of different parts of the harbor, some of them with competing priorities. It is absolutely convoluted, said Slamman. The lack of coordination is co-hindering economic activity. Overlapping municipal, provincial, federal, and agency jurisdictions make doing business on the waterfront complex. One agency or level of government may have jurisdiction over a dock wall, while another oversees the water in front of the dock wall. There are about a dozen different agencies with a role to play on the waterfront. The berth at Rees Street that Slayman used throughout the winter is unavailable from April to early fall due to Toronto Harbour Nautical Centre programming. Slayman wanted permission from the Toronto Port Authority and Create TO to operate from a mooring location at 161 Cherry Street, which Slayman says would have been ideal because it's near the new Bajaji Park in the Portlands. It was available immediately and met the power requirements for his business. Create TO, the real estate agency for the City of Toronto, has jurisdiction over the land at the Cherry Street location. The Toronto Port Authority, TPA, has jurisdiction over the water lot. Following a positive meeting on March 6 with representatives from the TPA and Create TO, Slayman thought he had everything locked down. In an email sent that same day and obtained by the Star, Create TO official Byron Bowen agreed that the most logical location appears to be the dock shop's former berth, which was the spot Slayman wanted. Hoping we can find a path to welcoming this new waterfront activity to the Portlands, wrote Bowen, Create TO's director of Portlands Asset Management, in the email sent to Slayman and a senior executive at the Toronto Port Authority. Bowen's role at Create TO is to lead initiatives to maximize the potential of Toronto's waterfront and expanding Portland's. Then in April, Slayman was informed by the TPA that the location was considered industrial and not compatible with a sauna business. Slayman says a retailer called the Dock Shop previously occupied the spot, and there are 2 unused boats moored nearby. TPA spokesperson Claire Pfeiffer said the boats moored near the spot are commercial industrial vessels, and the Dock Shop moved to the Outer Harbor Marina. The Dock Shop specializes in boating needs from ropes to anchors, electronics, and hardware. The Dock Shop is a commercial business serving the boating industry. It is not analogous to a recreational sauna business, said Pfeiffer. She said using the spot for a sauna was determined to be incompatible due to the area's industrial and marine shipping environment, adding that it posed safety concerns. Scott Pennington, Vice President, Portland's management for Create TO, told the Star that while the organization is always looking for uses that build the Portland's economic and cultural vitality, proposals related to water or the marine shipping environment require appropriate permissions. Slayman said he was forced to consider the Outer Harbor Marina after he was shut out of the 161 Cherry, but the cost of upgrading the site to provide enough power for his business was $100,000. The site is also a private community requiring patrons to enter via keycard, which limits access, he said. The sauna is being stored at the Toronto Islands pending a solution to the problem, or until Slayman can return to his berth at Rees Street in November. It's extremely convoluted, next to impossible to start operating any business on Toronto's waterfront, said Slayman. TDSB cuts could affect up to 800 jobs. Full impact of potential layoffs won't be known until next school year. Almost 800 positions at the Toronto Public Board are on the chopping block, including more than 200 teachers who have received surplus notices, warning them they could be out of work come the fall, according to a document filed with the Ministry of Labor. The termination of employment form details the numbers of hourly and salaried positions affected, both union and non-union, by location, and for support staff includes lunchroom supervisors, educational assistants, designated early childhood educators, and clerical staff, said John Weatherup, president of Toronto Education Workers, CUPE Local 4400. The total of 792 includes previously announced cuts to vice principals, educators, support staff, and centrally assigned staff. The Star has reported on estimates of teaching positions, 289 anticipated, and other staff position cuts, totaling several hundred, but the document provides the most clarity to date. For the members losing their jobs, I feel sick to my stomach. And the programs are cutting, it's just terrible for students, Weatherup said. They are decimating model schools, outdoor education, everything that makes the school board different. Apart from the upset over job losses, he suspects twice as many employees will be forced to relocate. There will be people moved across the system, he said. There's going to be bumping, transfers, teachers are going to be moving, our members will be moving. So far, about 300 elementary teachers have received surplus notices with no prior notice of consultation, said Helen Victoris, who is the president of the Elementary Teachers of Toronto Union Local. Secondary teachers in Toronto are also getting layoff notices, but the number is unknown. While it's unclear how many will actually be unemployed in September, she said, elementary teachers started reaching out to their unions saying, "What is this?" and panicking a little bit. It was very shocking. The exact number of final layoffs in non-teaching jobs is also unclear. Under collective agreements, boards are required to send out notices of potential layoffs before the end of the school year. But with retirements and amid a teacher shortage, we are very hopeful that all of the teachers that receive these notices will have their positions next year, because this is absolutely what is necessary for the delivery of a strong public education system, said Victoris. The Toronto Board, which was taken over by the provincial government a year ago, for financial reasons, is in the process of budgeting for next year and is grappling with a $25 million deficit, as well as declining enrollment, which affects per-student funding amounts, as well as the number of teachers needed. It has about 41,000 employees in total. In prior years, there would have been public consultations and a chance for parents and staff to weigh in, added Victoros, but under provincial supervision that has not happened. An in-person meeting with the board's Parent Involvement Committee to go over the budget has been rescheduled to next Tuesday. Boards across the province are now setting their budgets for the fall, and at the Peel District School Board, more than 300 permanent teachers, 159 in secondary and 172 in elementary, have been declared surplus for next year. The Toronto Catholic Board is not cutting any teaching positions, but is ending its daytime international language program affecting 77 non-teaching instructors. Education Minister Paul Calandra, speaking at an unrelated announcement Tuesday at Toronto's Western Technical Commercial High School, said declining enrollments is an issue for boards including Toronto and Peel. He said in the 8 boards the province has taken over, the appointed supervisors are to look at the funding model. If there are shortcomings, we want to know. The Ottawa Public Board, which is also under supervision, has made $1 million in cuts to administration, which will instead be spent in the classroom, he added, and the Toronto Public Board is eliminating some outdoor education centers rather than spending money on rebuilding the ones that are old and outdated. He said the government is spending more money on education than any government in history. It's $43 billion, but what is the outcome of the $43 billion? What does that give to our students? Do our educators have the tools that they need to succeed? However, Calandra said the current system of early notifications, where surplus notices don't necessarily lead to teacher job losses, should be changed, and I can imagine how frustrating it is for teachers that every year at this time we go through this process where we issue surplus notices before we can actually say who's going to be in the classroom. He said he's confident that a vast majority, like every other year, will find themselves back in the classroom, but we've got to find a better way of doing this. David Meston, president of the Elementary Teachers Federation of Ontario, said the union would be certainly in favor of any way of looking at the system to prevent the kind of disruptions that are present, keeping in mind that there are obviously seniority considerations within a school and within a board, but anything that we could work on together to find a less disruptive system would be great. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Ford fires caucus chair after tense meeting. Wallman clashes with Premier over MPP's pension plan. Premier Doug Ford fired his hand-picked caucus chair for defending progressive conservative MPP's upset about a new pension plan that could have drained thousands of dollars from their monthly pay. In the recent closed-door meeting of Tory MPPs at which no aides were present, Will Bauma Brant told Ford that he should listen to concerns about the high cost of buying back time in a revived pension meant to benefit legislatures from all parties. Bauman was relaying concerns from caucus colleagues who felt the pension plan had been poorly explained, leaving many surprised to learn buying in could cost 6 figures. Those expenses stem from Ford's insistence the plan not rely on government funds, meaning MPPs would have to cover both the employee and employer share. That type of fiscal responsibility didn't square with Ford's recent purchase and panicked sale of a $28.9 million Bombardier Challenger private jet, and when Bauma, who is also the Premier's parliamentary assistant, raised it in the meeting of a chill descended upon the second-floor room at Queen's Park. After the confab ended, the 3-term backbencher was relieved of his duties as caucus chair and replaced with Matthew Ray, Perth Wellington, according to a dozen Tory sources, speaking confidentially in order to discuss internal deliberations. Bauman declined a comment in person to a Star reporter and did not return calls, or emails. Ford did not deny the rift, which was first reported by Global News on Tuesday. Will is a great member. He served 4 years. Now we have Matt Ray in there. Will's traveling in the U.S. with me. He's my parliamentary assistant, the premier told reporters, referring to upcoming official trips to governors' meetings in South Carolina and Utah. Pressed on whether he was mad at Balma for telling him what he didn't want to hear, Ford replied, "We have a tight team, and what we discuss in cabinet and in caucus stays there." But eyewitnesses said it was a tense scene as the mild-mannered Brantford area optometrist took on the bombastic premier. Some MPPs said Balma was pushing his luck by chiding Ford for the private jet purchase first revealed by the Star on April 17th, while members would be saddled with the unexpected costs of a pension plan that requires individuals to also pay the employer's contribution. His tone and his body language were a little disrespectful to the boss. "You don't do that in front of everyone," said one witness. Ford listened to Balma, whose shoulders hunched, face glowering. Others defended the caucus chair, emphasizing he rightly read the room and was giving voice to their unhappiness. They argued Balma saw that many were displeased with Ford's ambivalence about what they contend is a badly explained pension plan. Tory MPPs say they were not properly informed that his pension plan, announced last year, 3 decades after then Premier Mike Harris scrapped the benefit, came with such high costs for those who want to buy back the missed employee and employer credits. Depending on years of service, that top-up could mean paying hundreds of thousands of dollars into the plan that took effect on January 1st. MPPs elected prior to that can purchase pension credits to top up the plan as if they had been paying into it all along. Divisions crystallized when several wealthier MPPs rallied to Ford's defense, scolding others for expecting help in covering the employer's side of the pension costs. Finance Minister Pete Bethlen-Falvey, who had a successful career on Bay Street and Wall Street, pointed out that the Treasury cupboard is bare, with a projected budget deficit that almost doubled to $13.8 billion between last November and March. The rich people jumped in and defended Ford, said MPP, adding many Tories were very upset. Balma was fired for trying to be supportive. There had been a belief that the government could secure all-party support with the New Democrats, Liberals, and Greens for tax dollars to partially top up the employer's side of the pension plan, which is typically how such a system works. But that was never an option, insisted 2 sources close to Ford. Bauman's replacement as PC caucus chair over the fracas is telling, said the New Democrat leader Merritt Stiles. The premier's own caucus can't stomach that he bought a private luxury jet, said Stiles. It shows you once again that this is a premier who is listening to nobody. Interim Liberal leader John Fraser said Bauman is a well-respected and liked by MPPs from all parties, which made his ouster a shock. That's what happens in this government if you speak truth to power. Girl age 3 dead after winds lift inflatable castle. A 3-year-old girl has died after she was seriously injured over the weekend when strong winds lifted an inflatable castle into the air during a community celebration in Montreal Park, the coroner's office confirmed Tuesday. 11 people were injured, with 6 of them sent to hospital when the bouncy castle and a tent were tossed by high winds on May 31st at Parc Ouellet in LaSalle, a borough in southwest Montreal, Emergency Medical Services said. A coroner has been assigned to investigate the causes and circumstances surrounding the death. A 2013 study published by the Public Health Agency of Canada identified 674 injuries associated with inflatable attractions reported through the Canadian Hospitals Injury Reporting and Prevention Program between 1990 and 2009. TTC repairs mean Line 1 closures. A large stretch of Line 1 will be shut down Sunday, with additional delays for commuters next Monday as the TTC completes infrastructure work ahead of the FIFA World Cup. TTC CEO Mandeep Lally and COO Fort Monaco announced that closures at a press conference on Tuesday. With just 9 days to go until Toronto is expected to welcome more than 300,000 fans for the FIFA World Cup, the TTC is scrambling to finish repairs to ensure the city's transit system runs smoothly. These latest closures will remove 4 of 6 remaining reduced speed zones, with the goal of removing all of them before June 12th. I know closures cause frustrations, and I want to just add a thank you note to our customers for their patience and understanding, but this work matters, Lally said. Every reduced speed zone removed means faster journeys, fewer delays, and a more reliable subway. On Sunday, Line 1 will be shut down completely from the Sheppard West to St. George stations. Partial service will be restored on Monday between Wilson and Lawrence West stations. Lally added that on Monday, Line 1 riders should add around 20 minutes to their travel times as the TTC reduces subway cars to just one track between Wilson and Lawrence West stations. Reduced speed zones have become a common feature of the subway system in recent years. The system currently has 6 zones where speed is reduced to 10 to 25 km/h for track maintenance. While the TTC has previously said the system will never be fully rid of slow zones, Monaco said the goal is to try to get into FIFA with as low a number of speed zones as possible. Hamilton, official part ways as Markham investigation drags on. A senior planning official in the city of Hamilton is now out of the job amid a probe into allegations he collected payments from a developer during his previous role with another municipality. In a statement issued Monday, Hamilton announced that Arvind Prasad has concluded his employment with the city as the general manager for planning and economic development. The decision, which the city and Prasad mutually agreed on, brought an abrupt end to Hamilton's planning and economic development boss's tenure, which lasted less than a year. The city of Hamilton has previously put Prasad on administrative leave following a Star report that the city of Markham was investigating a complaint about Prasad, its former commissioner of development services. The complaint accused Prasad of invoicing more than $140,000 for consulting work to Grit Developments between December 2023 and March 2025. During that time, Prasad endorsed a zoning request to allow the same developer to build an industrial complex on agricultural land that includes a heritage building. The complaint alleges Markham Council adopted to zoning change in a July 2024 meeting. Markham's probe, initiated last August, remains ongoing. Prasad did not respond to a request for comment on his departure from Hamilton. He has previously denied any wrongdoing through his lawyer. The city of Hamilton did not disclose any details of the agreement to end Prasad's employment. A spokesperson for Hamilton had previously told the Star that the administrative leave was to allow the appropriate time for fair and equitable process to unfold and to support all parties involved. Grit Developments has denied all allegations of wrongdoing and said the Markham development was properly vetted by city staff and approved by council. Prasad became the general manager for planning and economic development with the city of Hamilton in June 2025, after serving the city of Markham since 2018. The complaint was filed with Markham by Toronto businessman Prasanna Balachandran, who provided the city with records including 9 invoices allegedly between Prasad and the developer. The Star cannot independently verify the authenticity of the records. He said the move by Hamilton was positive and showed the city acted promptly in the wake of the Star's report on the investigation. He expressed continued frustration with the slow progress in Markham's investigation, which hasn't yielded any conclusions after 10 months. I'm extremely disappointed. I think that the allegations here are serious enough to prompt very decisive and timely action, Balachandran said, noting that both the city and its political leadership have chosen not to. Markham spokesperson Brian Froy has said that the city is concerned by the allegations and will take appropriate action as necessary, but declined to comment on workplace matters or internal investigations. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. FIFA warned to comply with ticket resale law. Just 2 weeks before the World Cup kicks off, the Ontario government has threatened to give FIFA a yellow card over non-compliance with the province's new anti-scalping law. World Soccer's governing body has been warned to comply with amendments to the Ticket Sales Act, or it faces fines of up to $250,000, said a spokesperson for Stephen Crawford, Ontario's Minister of Public Business and Service Delivery. As a primary seller, FIFA is permitted to set ticket prices at its discretion. However, if tickets are resold on their platform above face value, those sales are subject to our government's ticket resale rules and enforcement framework. Crawford's spokesperson Julia Pankin said in an email, "We expect all sellers, including FIFA, to comply with our provincial legislation and have no time for ticket gouging. The amendments passed last month make it illegal to resell tickets to any event in Ontario, including 6 Toronto games that are part of soccer's global showcase, for more than their face value. In addition to its main ticketing website, FIFA also operates a resale site. FIFA didn't immediately respond to a request for comment. In an open letter to Premier Doug Ford, NDP leader Marit Stiles said resale companies are openly flouting the new legislation. Resellers like StubHub continue to sell tickets for more than their original price. Even FIFA appears to be doing so on its own ticket resale platform. This is unacceptable and appears to directly contravene the new law," Stiles wrote. FIFA said Stiles is also using loopholes in the legislation to hike up the original face value of World Cup tickets. Some tickets were allegedly taken down off of FIFA's main ticketing site, but then relisted at higher face value. "Your government did not act in time to keep Toronto Blue Jay fans from paying obscene prices for the World Series. We can avoid a repeat of this with the World Cup by stepping in now," Stiles wrote. PCs give MPPs 5-month summer break. Opposition claims Ford uses recess to avoid scrutiny. In the longest summer break in years, Premier Doug Ford's government has adjourned the legislature until October 27th, the day after municipal elections across Ontario. The 148-day recess after MPPs sat just 30 days since an unusually long winter hiatus has opposition parties accusing Ford of avoiding scrutiny over controversies like student loan cuts and his purchase of a $28.9 million jet dubbed the Gravy Plane. "This government can't get out of this place fast enough because we are calling them to account every day," New Democrat leader Marit Stiles said Tuesday after grilling Ford in question period over affordability issues, branding him out of touch. The legislature rose 2 days earlier than scheduled on a parliamentary calendar that had MPPs returning to Queen's Park on September 14th. Instead, they will come back 7 weeks later and sit 23 days before the next winter recess begins on December 10th. Government House Leader Steve Clark defended the decision, saying legislative committees will sit over the summer and fall studying agriculture and public safety bills. "We're going to be very, very busy," he told reporters, "and then we don't want to interfere in the municipal elections." Green leader Mike Schreiner scoffed at the rationale to justify a 5-month break. "They directly interfered in Toronto elections back in 2018, so it's BS," Schreiner charged, referring to Ford's move to cut the size of Toronto City Council before the year's municipal vote. "The only reason we're not here is Doug Ford can't take the heat," said interim Liberal leader John Fraser, who trolled Ford over the jet in the legislature by handing the Premier silver pilot wings to pin on his lapel. "He told me where I could put it," Fraser added, grinning. "I'll leave it at that." Clark said the legislature also didn't sit till after the municipal elections in the fall of 2022. On the way into an afternoon caucus meeting, Ford told reporters the business of government will continue without the legislature sitting. We're going at full steam rather than sitting here and arguing with each other, he said. The summer break caps a stormy session during which Ford took away the city's role in Billy Bishop Airport, endured the turbulence of his jet purchase and its subsequent sale, passed a controversial law exempting himself and cabinet ministers from freedom of information requests, and a slip in his poll numbers. This summer will see the premier call by-elections to replace former New Democrat MPP Dolly Begum in Scarborough Southwest and Treasury Board President Caroline Mulroney in York Simcoe. Begum quit in February, switched to the federal Liberals, and became the area's MP after winning an April 13th by-election. Mulroney, who is resigning this week to return to private life, was given farewell hugs in the legislature Tuesday by at least 2 New Democrat MPPs wishing her well. Ford is also traveling to the United States as a mandatory review of the Canada-United States-Mexico Agreement. CUSMA begins in the continuing trade and tariff war with U.S. President Donald Trump. We're going to sit out there and we're going to sell Ontario, Ford said. We're going to send that message about working together, working with Mexico, working with the U.S., working with Canada, and get this deal. He heads to Greenville, South Carolina to lobby state governors June 21st to the 23rd at the Southeastern United States Canadian Province Conference, and the following week to Deer Valley, Utah for a meeting at the Western Governors Association. There will also be another trip to Washington and a meeting of Canada's premiers in Charlottetown in July. War trumps trade on Canadians' minds. Dominic LeBlanc, Mark Carney's point minister on Canada-U.S. relations, was no doubt feeling the pressure as he landed in Washington on Tuesday to kickstart trade talks with Donald Trump's administration. But it's less pressure than he was facing last year, according to some new polling from Abacus data. Canadians' anxiety about Trump's trade war has declined sharply from 2025, Abacus found. Tariffs as a top-of-mind concern have collapsed from 26% to 4%, Abacus CEO David Coletto writes in his report on the findings. Coletto learned this by looking into responses to a regular question Abacus poses on what keeps Canadians awake at night. Trump still is causing a wide range of worry in 2026, the poll found, but the war has replaced trade as a source of anxiety. A year ago, only 11% named any international conflict. Today it's 21%. And within that, the U.S.-Iran war is the runaway story with hundreds of respondents, typically some version of the war in Iran, many spontaneously linking it to gas prices or the threat of a wider escalation. Coletto carried out the survey with 1,920 Canadians from May 14th to May 20th, a good deal before Trump's social media post this week that took another 51st state poke at Canada. So maybe the next round of polling will show Canadians with annexation worries creeping up once again. But Trump is still managing to get in the way of Canadians' sleep, perhaps fittingly, since this is a president who seems to prefer posting on social media to getting some shut-eye in the wee hours of the night. Coletto writes, a year ago, the fear had a name and an address. Donald Trump, the White House, tariffs on Canadian goods. Today, the fear is Trump-derived, but more diffuse and more global. War, gas, the world is harder to control. Margin of error can't be calculated from surveys conducted online, as this one was, but a similar size, probability-based random sample would be within 2.23 percentage points 19 times out of 20. I was intrigued by the decline in trade anxiety given all the damage being wreaked by the ongoing tariff war and the heightened sense that the Trump administration may only be interested in further concessions from Canada, not another win-win deal. Perhaps, as other pollsters have also found, it's because Canadians aren't even sure Trump would keep to any deal with this country. Maybe they're watching the chaotic state of negotiations to end the war in Iran and realizing that any talks with Trump's U.S. are almost certainly destined to be erratic and unpredictable. That decline in anxiety may just be a what can we do shrug. I wondered how the anxiety of today compared to 2018 when Justin Trudeau's government was locked in the talks that produced the current Canada-United States-Mexico Agreement, CUSMA as we call it. Coletto went back to the data from that time and offered this comparison. In terms of trade anxiety in 2018, I think today is very different from 2018, he said. Back then, while people were worried about what the Trump administration would do, emotions were nowhere near as hot as they are today. Brian Clow, who was Trudeau's deputy chief of staff and part of those 2018 negotiations, has been saying this too. The Trump 2.0 is more emboldened about tariffs and perhaps less interested in a deal. 8 years ago, Trump also wasn't punctuating the discussions with 51st state jabs and had people around him to moderate his excesses. When Abacus asked Canadians what worried them about the trade war in 2018, Coletto said there was more concern about our own government not being able to defend Canada's interests. Today, there's less concern about the Carney government's capability and more about the Trump administration not living up to any deal we make. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre is likely to argue that the decline in trade anxiety is based on what he alleges is the Carney government's invisibility in the CUSMA renegotiations these past many months. This week, he's been casting the trip to Washington by LeBlanc and chief negotiator Janice Charette as too little too late. But as Coletto says for now, Canadians seem to have some confidence in Carney's government to do what's needed on the trade front. LeBlanc and Charette emerged from their meeting in Washington with U.S. Trade Rep. Jameson Greer with one message to convey: optimism in the face of inevitable turbulence. If they are feeling pressure, they didn't reveal it. That's an obvious tack to take when dealing with Trump, but it also helps that there is apparently less need to reassure an anxious nation. On this score, Canadians can see that Trump has a whole lot more worries, and they've taken them in too. Video shows officers tackling cyclist. A video showing multiple Toronto police officers tackling and arresting a cyclist during a stop sign enforcement in downtown Toronto has sparked heated reactions online, with one local cycling advocate calling it an excessive use of force. The nearly minute-long clip shared on X on Monday by cycling advocate and lawyer David Shelnut, also known as the biking lawyer, shows the perspective of another cyclist as they rode along a bike lane on Queens Quay West. As the cyclist approaches a stop sign at Little Norway Crescent, 3 police officers can be seen standing along the curb. One police officer then moves into the lane and motions for the cyclist, taking the video to stop before suddenly darting across the street. Off screen, a crash and commotion can be heard before the video pans to the left, where 2 other officers can then be seen running toward a different cyclist on the ground, being restrained by another officer on the sidewalk. A struggle between the officer and the cyclist ensues, and one of the officers can be heard instructing the cyclist to turn around while the officers hold them to the ground. A 4th officer joins in while the person can be heard moaning. This is an abuse of power. Toronto police told the Star that the officers were conducting a cyclist stop sign enforcement at Queens Quay West and Little Norway Crescent on Sunday around 6:30 p.m., adding that officers were positioned there to address complaints from members of the community over cyclists who weren't stopping at the posted sign. AFN chief slams Alberta separation in talks with King. The National Chief of the Assembly of First Nations rebuked the Alberta separation movement during a meeting with King Charles at Buckingham Palace on Tuesday. The King was there with us in unison that First Nations are foundational partners in the creation of Canada, and our relationship cannot be changed or moved just from politics. Cindy Woodhouse Nebenak told the Canadian press. As long as the sun shines, the grass grows, and the river flows, we're all treaty people in Canada. The Alberta government is putting forward a referendum in October asking voters if they want to remain part of Canada or to pursue a second binding referendum on separating from Canada. We've got a beautiful country. If you don't want to be part of it, you're free to leave. You won't be taking any land with you, Woodhouse Nebenak said. She said there will be further conversations with King Charles about potential separation and that they are working on a youth initiative together. She is also pushing King Charles to commission treaty medals, as his mother and grandmother had done, to symbolize the continued relationship between First Nations and the Crown. She wore her own treaty medal to the meeting. I think we need to be united. We have to work together, she said. She was joined by a delegation of First Nations leaders, including regional chiefs Bobby Cameron of Saskatchewan, Joanna Bernard of New Brunswick, and Willie Moore of Manitoba. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Volunteers aim to serve some comfort amid Ebola outbreak. For patients in an Ebola outbreak with no approved medicine or vaccine, there is little comfort. But Arles Beskwaki, a volunteer for the UN Food Agency, is doing her best, her hair covered by a pink bonnet. Beskwaki prepares porridge, omelets, and bread for breakfast in a shed outside the Evangelical Medical Center in Bunia, the heart of the outbreak in eastern Congo. Lunch and dinner might include fresh fruit with fufu made of mashed plantains, finished off by fruit. She feeds both patients and health workers. Even though the patients have this disease, they still feel better when they eat, and the doctors have the energy to treat the sick and give them medication. Beskwaki told the Associated Press as she prepared vegetables and potatoes with goat meat in a large pot. I'm here for them like a parent, preparing food so they feel comfortable. Her contribution may appear like a simple task, but it has become a critical support for the remote region as it grapples with the rapidly spreading Bundibugyo virus, the rare species of Ebola confirmed in May. As of Tuesday, 321 cases, including 48 deaths, have been confirmed in the Central African nation's three eastern provinces of Ituri, North and South Kivu, according to the World Health Organization. WHO spokesperson Christian Lindmeier said the number of suspected cases has dropped to 116 from 906 last weekend, as many were ruled out after investigation. Neighboring Uganda has had 15 cases and 1 death confirmed, its health ministry said Tuesday. Uganda closed its border with Congo last week despite WHO guidance not to do so. Meanwhile, Congolese authorities reopened Bunia's airport on Tuesday for domestic flights, requiring passengers to undergo temperature checks and respect strict sanitary measures. The International Organization for Migration on Tuesday urged governments to strengthen cross-border coordination instead, warning that border closures could drive people's movement underground and increase transmission risks. Viruses do not stop at borders, and neither should our response, said Ugochi Daniels, IOM Deputy Director General for Operations. When borders close, people often continue moving through informal routes where health screening and surveillance are limited. U.S. nixing $1.8 billion fund for allies of president. The Trump administration is scrapping plans to create a $1.8 billion fund meant to compensate allies of the Republican president, the Justice Department's top official said Tuesday, in retreating from a program that faced setbacks in the courts and a fierce political backlash that had threatened to stall key elements of the White House agenda. We are not moving forward with the fund, period, Blanche said in response to questions at a House hearing on the Justice Department budget. The blunt declaration marked an extraordinary and rare turnabout in the face of mounting political opposition to a fund official said was intended to compensate people who believe they have been improperly targeted by the criminal justice system. But since the fund's creation 2 weeks ago, it's been paused by a judge and lambasted by Democrats and Republicans alike. Israeli drone strikes on southern Lebanon on Tuesday killed 11 people, including a man along with his son and daughter. The state-run news agency said a day after U.S. President Donald Trump said Israel and the militant group Hezbollah agreed to dial back the fighting. Hezbollah, which is backed by Iran, launched dozens of projectiles and drones towards Israeli soldiers in southern Lebanon and Israeli cities and towns in recent days, as Israel's airstrikes killed dozens, including women and children in Lebanon. Hezbollah did not carry out any attacks on Israel after Trump's announcement. The ongoing hostilities, despite Trump's announcement and a nominal ceasefire that began in April, are deepening displacement for Lebanon's conflict-weary population. They are also a significant striking point in negotiations to extend a ceasefire in the U.S.-Israeli war in Iran, and the Islamic Republic wants any such deal to end fighting in Lebanon too. Two semi-official Iranian news agencies reported Tuesday that the country cut off communication with mediators facilitating the ceasefire talks. Another round of talks between Israel and Lebanon began Tuesday in Washington, where Lebanese negotiators will seek a full ceasefire that will prevent future attacks. The talks began in April and were the first in more than 3 decades between the countries, which have no formal diplomatic relations. Hezbollah has rejected direct talks, counting on pressure from Iran. The planned talks come days after Israeli ground troops made their deepest incursion into Lebanon in 26 years, and Israel then threatened to strike Beirut's southern suburbs, causing panic in the Lebanese capital as thousands fled. Man admits to fatally stabbing neighbor over radio sermons. Social worker was told of suicidal, murderous feelings day of 2023 attack. A Toronto man admitted on Tuesday to repeatedly stabbing his neighbor to death in the backyard of an East End apartment building after complaining about the victim loudly playing gospel sermons on a radio. Christopher Wood, age 69, stood in the prisoner's box in his orange jail jumpsuit and pleaded guilty to second-degree murder in the July 27, 2023 death of a 61-year-old Etop Ituan. The two men lived in neighboring apartment buildings on Coxwell Avenue near Dundas Street East that were managed by an organization providing support for individuals with mental health issues. I'm in a terrible situation, Wood wrote in a note received by a social worker on the morning of the attack. He said the noise coming from Intuan's unit was triggering great anxiety and panic in my psyche, and he didn't know what to do. It is also triggering great rage, as yet again, as has happened many times in my life, I am being victimized, Wood wrote. I have developed very suicidal and conversely murderous feelings. He signed the note, Best wishes, Chris W. In the summer of 2023, Wood had told his social worker that he was preoccupied and disturbed by a tenant in the building across the street loudly playing gospel radio from his balcony over the course of several weeks, according to an agreed statement of facts. A neighbor would later tell police that 2 days before the attack, he encountered a man behind Intuan's building who was looking for someone while complaining about continuous loud gospel sermons coming from a radio. The attack happened at the back of Intuan's building. One neighbor told police he confronted Wood from his balcony during the stabbing, but that Wood made no attempt to flee. An individual who called 911 flagged down 2 police officers driving along Coxwell Avenue who found Wood standing over Intuan's body in a pool of blood. A red knife was found nearby, along with a sheath in the pocket of Wood's shorts. A pathologist noted 42 injuries to Intuan's body, concluding he died from multiple stab wounds to the neck and head. The agreed statement of facts concluded by noting that on the morning of July 27, 2023, there was gospel music playing in Intuan's unit. A conviction of a second-degree murder carries an automatic sentence of life imprisonment with no chance at a parole for a period between 10 and 25 years, to be determined by Superior Court Justice Maureen Forrestal, following a sentencing hearing set for later this month. New bill takes aim at floor crossers. NDP parliamentary leader Don Davies has introduced a private member's bill that would compel floor crossers to face their voters before switching parties. Bill C-278 says no MP would be permitted to cross the floor without first sitting as an independent and then contesting and winning a seat under the new party banner. Davies said Prime Minister Mark Carney's move to secure a majority government through floor crossings was undemocratic and made people question the legitimacy of the democratic institutions. The balance of power in this House was shifted not by voters in an election, but by political operatives in the back room, he said. The Liberals won 169 seats in the 2025 election, 3 shy of a majority government, but 5 MPs crossed the floor between November and March. Discovery could halt progression. Researchers locate gene key to construction repair of DNA. A research team from Quebec has identified a mechanism that may be able to halt the paralysis caused by amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, or ALS. ALS is a neurodegenerative disease sometimes known as Lou Gehrig's disease. It attacks the neurons which control movement, leading to rapid paralysis. The disease is incurable with a life expectancy of 2 to 5 years after diagnosis. Professor Kesson Patton of the Institut National de la Recherche Scientifique, who led the new study, says most other research has centered on the motor regions of the brain. The Montreal team chose to focus instead on the cerebellum, which is a brain region associated with balance and coordination. Patton says research conducted on zebrafish found that the disease may begin outside the motor regions of the brain before the first visible symptoms appear, which could eventually lead to an earlier diagnosis and better treatment. It is known in ALS that there's DNA damage and problems with DNA repair, Patton said, and we have identified the enzyme responsible for this defect. The experiments on zebrafish, which share many genetic and cellular mechanisms with humans, revealed to scientists early cerebral atrophy characterized by the loss of 2 essential types of neurons. The research suggests that ALS, like other neurodegenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and multiple sclerosis, begin to develop gradually several years before manifesting openly. The team detected a decrease in the activity of a gene that produces an enzyme essential for the synthesis of purines, which are molecules used in the construction and repair of DNA. This disease inactivity means DNA damage can accumulate and cellular repair systems fail, leading to cell degeneration. Patton said identifying this mechanism could lead to better patient screening. If there are ALS carriers in the family, we believe that imaging of the cerebellum could be performed early on before the onset of motor symptoms, he said. Best of all, the researchers found the mechanism they discovered might be reversible. In an experimental model, researchers succeeded in restoring the activity of the gene, which led to a reduced damage, better neuron survival, and a halt in disease progression at the cellular level. While scientists are far from curing ALS, Patton says the discovery could lead to better therapies or even useful supplements. I'd like to know if there's something we can start doing earlier, for example, in familial cases where we know there's a genetic component but symptoms haven't appeared yet, Patton said. Between 3,000 and 4,000 people live with ALS in Canada. The findings of the study were published in the medical journal Brain. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the June 3rd month issue of the Toronto Star. Your reader has been Claudia, and I thank you for listening.